Today is Friday, December the 21st, 2018. Hello, and welcome to Planets in Politics, a special report for January 2019, the Deep State War. Greetings. In this report, I will cover the main issue in American politics today, Trump versus the Deep State, and share with you the astrological synchronicity in all of this, and show you the aspects and transits for the major players. Recently, Trump has been winning against the Deep State in the Russian collusion story. It is now unraveling as the facts come to light. The 19,000 or so supposedly deleted emails from Strzok and Page paint a much clearer picture of the entire treasonous scam, all of it meant to help Hillary challenge the election. And Trump just announced the U.S. is pulling out of Syria. This time, I believe it will stay that way, and no false flag chemical attack, like there has been several times in the past, will pull the U.S. back in. It's all falling apart on the Deep State. In this video, I will discuss transits for Trump, Clinton, Comey, and Mueller, as well as the United States, and discuss how all of this ties into the two outer planet aspects we're having in January, Jupiter square Neptune and Saturn sextile Neptune. These two aspects are the major astrological events for 2019, and the first passes for each happen in January, on the 13th and 31st, respectively. So first, a quick discussion on these two aspects, because they're so important. They really are the theme for the entire year. Starting with Jupiter square Neptune, the first pass is going to be in January, and then in June and September. This will be an incredible expansion of consciousness, a great awakening, move us beyond our safe and secure boundaries in life, to chart new territory. It will be a time of overcoming the limitations of the past, the limitations to our perceptions, seeing things we haven't seen in the past or refused to see. This will bring people together, because as of now, as a society, we're very divided. We cannot come to a mutual agreement on what reality is, because we have so many different beliefs and perspectives. You know, Pisces says, I believe, whereas Sagittarius says, I perceive. And the difference is, perspectives are something that you see so that you know that they're true because you have evidence. Whereas beliefs, you may not have physical evidence. You have faith. You believe things that you may not see, and that includes superstitions or things that are wrong. And this battle that each of us fights, both internally and on a social level, between our beliefs and our perspectives, is really going to be the major theme of this year. And we're really all going to be challenged to go outside of our current perspective. And we're going to need to rely on our beliefs. And it's going to be quite an amazing time. So, in order for this expansion of consciousness to happen, we need a big event, a collective event, one that causes everyone to get on the same page of reality and view life in the same way, on at least a basic level. And this big event is shaping up to be the downfall of the Deep State. Now, the most overt part of this event is the Russian collusion scandal. That's the part we all see. It's in the news, and this is just what is on the surface, though. There is so much more. But whatever arises with respect to this aspect will be hard to believe, and that's one of the major elements of it. At least for most people in society. Certainly most truth seekers already know, and they're patiently waiting for this moment. But it's going to be hard to believe, and I think that everyone, on some level, at some point this year, is going to experience a great awakening. Become aware of things that you weren't aware of in the past, and it's going to be something to move you and the rest of society beyond the boundaries that we currently live by. So for some, what is hard to believe will come in the form of the revelations surrounding the whole Russian collusion story, the contents of the deleted emails, and how all of that unwinds before a national audience, how it was all just a treasonous scam to unseat the president. The true motivations behind our trusted public servants will startle people to awaken those that haven't already. But there is a lot of good with this aspect. It brings a lot of compassion and forgiveness, a desire for artistic expression, and humanitarian values as well. Basically, all Pisces things get activated and expanded. It's a spiritual awakening, and it can bring a great sense of relief, like a burden has been laid down. And these Jupiter-Neptune hard aspects, they tend to draw a crowd. People need to feel like they're part of the sea of humanity. And whenever we have these big Jupiter-Neptune aspects, it tends to create a crowd, like in February 2003 at Jupiter opposition Neptune. We had the biggest anti-war demonstrations in history, or at least the history of this country, and actually it happened all across Europe as well. So we could see some of that concurrent with political events. There may be some event that pulls everyone out into the streets. But beyond the mundane world of politics and all of this stuff that is going on with the fight against the deep state, we should remember that this is an excellent aspect that represents a great awakening for each of us individually as well as the collective. And then the Saturn sextile Neptune. This too has 3 passes, and the first will be in January on the 31st. And this will bring much needed sobriety to our belief system, a time when we can come to terms with irrational fears and superstitions. You know, those beliefs that we have no proof of. You know, sometimes they're really good. They have to do with matters of faith and so forth. But a lot of times they are superstitions and irrational fears. And this kind of aspect gives ourselves some useful therapy to overcome those things. Saturn comes along and evaluates our beliefs and shows us that many of them are really just superstitions, and we can lay them down without worrying about upsetting the course of your life. You can lay them down and maintain your sense of security because Saturn is in sextile to Neptune now. So Saturn takes the illusion out of Neptune and makes it more practical and shows us how to restructure our beliefs and insists that beliefs are necessary but must be tested in practical reality. This aspect will bring an opportunity to change your beliefs, hopefully for the better. As well, because it's Saturn, even though it's a sextile, it's going to limit our connection to the collective, while at the same time Jupiter is doing the exact opposite. It expands our connection to the collective. So this aspect is going to keep us grounded in reality while we go through this very expansive Jupiter aspect. It's very helpful that this one is coming along at the same time. And this one is Capricorn to Pisces. It's entirely within the 4th quadrant, the quadrant of self-transcendent. And this particular sextile is known as the sextile of philanthropy. That is the desire to help those who genuinely deserve it. It promises to help people whom society has swept under the rug. So just like the Jupiter aspect, we could see an outpouring of humanitarian values, possibly changes to the way we deal with the prison system and so forth, and a lot of suffering in the world that we don't seem to be able to get a grip on. Saturn's going to be able to enable us to do that and help the people whom society has swept under the rug. And together, these 2 aspects will change our relationship to the collective, because it's all about what's happening to Neptune in Pisces. Jupiter brings us together, but Saturn keeps us sober and grounded. Together, they bring a great awakening, and that's what we're looking for starting in January. Now, I'm starting off here with New Year's Day to point out the Sun conjunct Saturn. That'll be at 11 degrees of Capricorn. And recall the executive order that Trump signed on December the 21st, 2017, was the first Sun conjunct Saturn in this Saturn cycle. And now we see on January the 1st, Sun conjunct Saturn once again. Symbolism of this aspect is that it heralds the start of the new Saturn cycle, a return to traditional values, especially for authority figures who must substantiate that they are working towards the long-term survival of the nation. That little phrase, I kind of worked on that one a while because I really wanted to make it succinct, to make it clear exactly what leaders need to be doing now. They need to substantiate what they're doing and how it relates to the survival of the people and of the culture as well. And that's the quality of this aspect, which makes a very nice start of the new year. So let's start with the transits for President Donald Trump. Starting on December the 18th, this is the day he did a complete 180-degree reversal of U.S. policy and decided that he wanted to pull all U.S. troops out of Syria. Now, it's very good news. We never should have been there in the first place, and we wanted to get out of there last year, but then they had that false flag chemical attack, and we got pulled back in. But this time, I think it's going to work. Let's take a look at what transits he was having. Jupiter, Quincunx, Mercury. You'll see here transiting Jupiter at 8 degrees of Sagittarius, Quincunx his natal Mercury at 8 degrees of Cancer. Now, we can't underestimate a quincunx in its ability to bring a precise adjustment, a very specific event. In this case, it is interesting to note that Jupiter in Sagittarius was the active agent of change, showing the adjustments that Jupiter is making in the new cycle. I've been talking about this, a more principled return to traditional values, just like Saturn in Capricorn and just like Neptune in Pisces. And the quincunx can be very compelling, like you are being pulled along by forces greater than yourself. And he may very well be. He may have been forced to do it in some way. So take note of the quincunx because there's a lot of them happening in transits for people this coming month. Moving along to December the 23rd, he's getting Jupiter trine Pluto. Jupiter at 10 degrees of Sagittarius trines his Pluto at 10 degrees of Leo. Well, that's a very good transit, considered one of the best transits in the book, sure to bring him lots of confidence and good fortune. Things will go his way. This is the kind of transit that gives him the confidence to do something bold, like pursue justice. He certainly feels like he has the reins of power now, and he can use them to his benefit. And note that Mercury is very close by, and that adds to the power of this moment for him. Mercury trine Pluto can speak efficaciously to the collective, and hence sway the masses. He should get a lot of public support during these transits to his Pluto. And Mars is trining his Saturn around the same time, and that helps him, gives him some stability and fortitude. And next week, Venus trines Saturn and Venus, so it looks pretty good for Trump in the month of December. And then fast forward to February the 1st, but basically all of this will be leading up at the last week of January, which is really the point of culmination for the transits of everyone else I'm mentioning in this report. But it just happens to be exact on the 1st of February for him. It's Jupiter opposition Uranus. You'll see there Jupiter will be at 17 degrees of Sagittarius. It's moving very fast these days. Will oppose Uranus at 17 degrees of Gemini. And he's going to have 2 more passes of this. So it's a really great transit, actually. It's really one of the best transits in the book, just like the Jupiter trine Pluto. And I'm saying here this will affect him bigly. I put that in quotes because it's one of his terms. It's a quintessential Trump transit because you'll notice he has a really close Jupiter trine Uranus in his natal chart. Jupiter at 17 degrees of Libra to 17 Gemini. It's almost exact. So it really is a quintessential Trump kind of transit. Very lucky and fortunate. And it's an excellent transit, which brings an end to restrictions. That's what's so wonderful about it. It's a surprising change of circumstances that brings relief and newfound freedom, youthfulness, and optimism for life. This is such an important transit that comes by every 12 years that everyone should take special note of it, because it can be like a gift from the universe. It's that lucky. And here Trump is getting two very, very good transits in 2 months in a row. And this is great for Trump because he has had the Russian collusion story hanging over him like the sword of Damocles, threatening doom over his presidency ever since he took office 2 years ago. So the relief from restrictions that this transit brings will most likely translate as a complete end to the Russian collusion scam. I mean, you can get that monkey off his back. Now, exactly what else occurs in connection with this is the really big question. What happens to those burdens he's laying down, like Hillary, Comey, and Mueller? So let's take a look at their transits, starting with Hillary Clinton. So around the end of December, she's getting Neptune quincunx her Mars. You'll see here Neptune just starting 14 degrees of Pisces, going to quincunx her Mars in the very early part of the 14th degree of Leo. So this is going to mean a sudden influx of energy from the spirit world. Neptune is the non-material plane of existence, and this quincunx basically just gives you a large dose of that. Suddenly you feel very connected to the spirit world, like she needs to follow her spiritual calling in life. Make you really delusional, lost sense of self, low energy, and easily deceived. You know, Neptune dissolves, and this transit is one of several that is making her feel that she has no power and is being swept along by forces that she cannot control. It's actually one of 4 quincunxes that she's getting. So she probably feels like she's lost her sense of direction. That's her Mars. So maybe even like she's dying. A precise adjustment is what the quincunx calls for, and that needs to be made, basically, before she can move forward. And that's the general interpretation of this. Some precise adjustment, and it could be a major one. As well, all tough Neptune-Mars combinations can result in humiliation. And moving along to the 29th, at the end of the month, she's getting Jupiter sextile Neptune. Here, she's got one nice transit that will make her feel melancholy and reflective, but she will not likely have much time for that because she's getting Saturn square Neptune on the 31st. So you'll see that Saturn at 11 degrees, 32 minutes of Capricorn, squares her natal Neptune at 11 degrees, 22 minutes of Libra. So this is a tough one. Her career and her grip on life is dissolving. It can be very difficult when Saturn, you know, that thing that you trust the most, suddenly feels like it's going away. It can be a time of great uncertainty, like you can't count on anyone like you normally could. Dependable things no longer are dependable. You feel very isolated from the rest of the world. All Saturn squares to the outer planets like Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, they have a way of cutting you off from the collective. And you can easily deceive yourself. It's hard to deal with just the normal aspects of life. So it's doubtful she will be able to defend herself now. And that's what's so important, because she really needs to do that. This is very debilitating and will likely take a toll on her health. This is another transit that says you got to watch out for your health. It would not surprise me if she falls ill during this time around the last week of the year in December. And on the 1st, we've got that Sun conjunct Saturn at 11 degrees of Capricorn. and that's going to be squaring her Neptune. So that's kind of symbolic. It's almost as if Trump's executive order has her in mind. And moving along to the 21st of January, we're going to be having the Mars square Saturn aspect. And that'll be 13 degrees of Aries to 13 degrees of Capricorn. And that's going to make close transits to her natal Mars at 14 degrees of Leo. You'll see it's just at the end of the 13th degree. So she's going to be getting Mars trine Mars. Well, that's one nice transit. It gives her a little bit of energy. But 2 days later, the big one is Saturn Quincunx Mars. So now we have another Quincunx. So Saturn brings limitations, again, to her Mars, her direction, and unexpected facts, reality, basically. Saturn brings reality to your front door, and that's in the form of concrete facts and things like that. So here they are revealed, and they stop her from moving forward while she reevaluates the situation. And just like the previous Quincunx, some sort of precise adjustment needs to be made before she can move forward. Because again, it's to her Mars. This places her Mars at the focal point of a Yod configuration. So we're getting the Saturn sextile Neptune aspect, which is one of the two really important ones this month. And this one forms a Yod to planets at 14 degrees of Leo, and that includes her Mars. So, in a way, we experience this Saturn sextile Neptune. We're compelled to by whatever happens to her at this time. She becomes kind of a symbol of that. And this is actually happening with Mueller as well, who's got a planet up there at 14 degrees of Leo. So I think that's quite telling. And now for a couple of more quincunxes. On January the 22nd, Pluto quincunx Saturn. Wow, we got Pluto at 21 degrees of Capricorn, quincunxing Saturn at 21 degrees of Leo. Well, this one brings a sudden, powerful, precise adjustment to her reality. Pluto comes in and shakes her reality to the core. You know, like a volcano going off in your life. It can be very intense, very fateful and karmic, considering the planets involved. Powerful forces of destruction. And of course, Pluto rules police actions. And those things move directly towards her in order to make some sort of precise adjustment. You really got to watch out for those Pluto quincunx transits. They can unleash powerful energies in your life. Some folks are never the same after a transit like this. And then moving forward to January 28th, another quincunx, Neptune quincunx Pluto. This one from 14 degrees of Pisces to 14 degrees of Leo. Yet another precise adjustment as Neptune comes in and dissolves her power. Another influx from the spirit world dissolves her Pluto, her power, her connection to the collective, her place in the community. Okay, so this is the last pass, and this one's been going on for a while now. And we can already see the effect, because she can no longer even draw a decent crowd for her public events. I pointed that out last time she had a public event. I mean, the echo of her voice was really loud because there was nobody in the room, hardly. So this is the kind of thing that's happening to her. Her connection to the collective is dissolving. And that's why I say this is the end for her. 4 major quincunx transits. 3 of them in the last week of January. This is an alarming number of quincunx transits, considering that the quincunx is the only aspect in astrology that is associated with death. Honestly, we cannot rule out the possibility that she dies. Maybe in the same way as McCain and Bush Sr. You know, make it look like it was natural causes. And really, she has been the main detractor from Trump's presidency from the start. And now that Trump is getting this, gaining freedom with that Jupiter opposition Uranus, he's gaining freedom from this sort of thing. This is the exact sort of thing that he's supposed to be laying down, a burden to be laid down. The coincidence is just too obvious. She is going down, and Trump wins his freedom from her and her legacy. That's not going to chase him around anymore either. No one's going to be able to say, she deserved it anymore. Exactly what going down entails for her, I'm not sure. Just to say, it looks very bad for Hillary in January. Okay, so let's move along to James Comey. He's been called to testify, and he's not been a cooperating witness. He stated he doesn't know or doesn't recall more than 100 times. Obviously, he's got something to hide. Probably what's contained in those emails that were recovered. So let's take a look at his transit. Starting in December, on the 20th, he's getting Saturn conjunct his Jupiter. That'll be at 10 degrees of Capricorn. Well, that one kind of slows him down. Now, I don't want to give this one a negative spin because it can be a really great transit. For most folks out there, it can be a time when you get really grounded and realistic about your plans for growth. And it can be a time of really restructuring, and a lot of good things can come to you during this time. But it does slow you down a bit. And he's probably feeling like he can't grow as usual. Freedom is kind of limited, and his professional contacts are a bit limited. He faces a period of restructuring his life in some way. Now, for most folks, that's probably not nearly as bad as what he obviously needs to go through at this time. So it may be a time of limited resources and forced to use what he has more efficiently. Saturn comes in and says, you don't get any more until you use what you have efficiently. And that's what makes us so much better after a transit like this. It makes us so much more efficient in life. But it can also bring some judgment because Saturn is the Lord of Karma. So I should point out, though, that I do not have his correct birth time. So I do not know exactly when this transit is happening, unlike Hillary and Trump, where I do have the correct birth time. So I can only say that these transits are happening roughly around this time. Just give us an idea of what he's going through. And it gets kind of interesting in January. He gets a Jupiter quincunxing his Mars. That'll be 14 degrees of Sagittarius to 14 degrees of Cancer. So Jupiter quincunx Mars will make him restless. Jupiter brings a lot of energy, pumps up Mars. But it also says you need to make a precise adjustment. And it will either push him to do something kind of rash, or it will move him along to his next step, regardless of how stubborn he is behaving, because he's been rather stubborn lately. So this will definitely light a fire under him and push him whether he wants to or not. And it's near the Jupiter square Neptune aspect, so he's going to be getting Neptune trining Mars around this time as well. But in general, the Jupiter square Neptune aspect needs an outlet, and he's going to be one of them. And it may play out through him because he's part of the revelations and all. And then moving along to the 28th, Saturn opposition Mars. Now this is the really big one. And again, it may not be exactly this day, but it'll be close. 14 degrees of Capricorn to 14 degrees of Cancer. Once again, it's Mars with him. But it's the last week in January for him, and whenever it is exactly, I'm not sure, but this transit brings limitations. It can be very frustrating. The limitations of career and life in general seem too much to cope with. Again, Saturn slows you down and says it's time to restructure. And Mars feels rather hemmed in. It gets frustrated. It acts out of anger and causes disruptions and conflicts, especially with authority figures. And again, I'm giving a kind of negative spin on this transit. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it is a transit that does slow you down and make you rethink things and stops you from being impulsive, prevents that kind of thing from happening, and so he feels hemmed in. It can be a point of culmination for efforts that began 14 years ago. Saturn is that way with the hard transits. You always want to look back to the conjunction and see what began at that point. And when you get to the opposition, if results are not realized, if you cut corners along the way, you didn't have integrity, well, then that really comes back to you. And a lack of integrity in the past becomes a serious issue now. As with Saturn, you always come to realize that you did it to yourself and have no one else to blame. So I see this as being indicative that karma comes back to him. And it's basically another one of Trump's enemies that are having really tough transits while he is doing so well. So let's move along to Robert Mueller. He has certainly been the leading culprit in this scandal. And let's just keep in mind that he is implicated in the Uranium-1 scandal. So he has a lot to lose personally if the deep state goes down completely. Now, the situation with him is, unlike Comey, he gets a series of rather good transits to start off. But then there's an interesting surprise at the end of the month. And once again, I got to point out, I don't have his exact birth time, so we can't be exact on the day, but within the time frame that we're looking at, everything seems to be culminating around the last week of January. So starting in December, on the 14th, he had Jupiter trine Pluto. Well, that's really good. That's the transit, one of them that Trump is getting. And he gave important testimony during this time, and things went his way. He was able to make a power play and force some things behind the scenes. But that was just one pass only. And then around the first of the year, things start getting interesting, as rather active with him. He gets Jupiter squaring his Mercury. That'll be 12 Sag to 12 Virgo. And it really promotes his own agenda and idea, but he may be forced to defend himself, things that he said, positions he's taken, which are likely broadcast over the media. And then more good news for him, Saturn trine Mercury. So he'll be doing a lot of critical thinking. Jupiter trine Sun, it's very lucky, very fortunate. And so is the Jupiter square Mars if he can keep it contained. All of that is quite fortunate for him in the beginning part of the month. And then as we move along to the 31st, sort of the point of culmination, concurrent with that Saturn sextile Neptune aspect, just like Hillary was getting those quincunxes to her Mars and Pluto at 14 degrees of Leo, with him it's the Sun. So he gets Saturn quincunx Sun and Neptune quincunx Sun. So this puts his Sun at the top of a Yod formation, just like with Hillary, the hand of God, the finger of fate. And again, it's not exactly, I'm not exactly sure what day it will be because we don't have his birth time, but it will be around this time. And just like her, he will be swept up by forces beyond his control. A precise adjustment is coming his way, just like everyone else. But likely whatever happens to him, again, like everyone else, is going to be a reflection of this Saturn sextile Neptune, which is what I'm so curious to see what all of these planets are going to do now that they're all in their ruling signs and in synchronicity with one another, and we see this culmination happening. So at the end of this month, we're looking to see what Saturn sextile Neptune does and how it helps to bring some sanity to an insane situation. Pisces rules prisons and insane asylums. So, anyway, the idea here is we're looking at all of this and seeing it as a reflection of the energy of the collective and how it plays out in these different people. And we really want to take a look at the transits for the USA, because what's going on really affects the USA, so we would expect to see some corresponding transits, and we certainly do. Starting on December the 18th, USA had Jupiter opposition Uranus, and that was 8 degrees of Sagittarius to 8 degrees of Gemini. Now that is the exact same transit that Trump is getting at the end of January, actually February the 1st. And that's the one that brings the big relief, the relief from release from restrictions. And what happened to the USA on that day? What was the big event? Well, the USA decided to end military action in Syria. That's the big relief. That's the major event. And it should have been a leading story, front page news, but, you know. And it also coincided with testimony by Comey. And around this time, we heard the announcement of the recovery of the deleted emails. And that, too, is a big relief, because it spells an end, or an absolute end, I should say, to the threat brought on by the Russian collusion story. So the USA got two really big reliefs on that day. Two burdens were laid down. And I think that that's a very clear indication of the power of this transit. Once again, the mainstream media is probably getting it all wrong, but I think we get it right here, because we can see the energy behind this. And this incredibly lucky transit happening exactly corresponding with the U.S. deciding to leave Syria is why I think it's really going to work this time. Actually, there's a couple other transits to add to that reasoning, but this is the main one, this relief that we can lay a burden down. And also around this time, Jupiter opposition ascendant, and that's a good transit. And Jupiter coming above the horizon has great significance as well, because Jupiter in the 7th house for the next year or so, that's the best time to be in a court case. Legal issues tend to work more in your favor when Jupiter is going through your 7th house. And hopefully we will see a lot of that over the coming year. Okay, so that's in December. Now let's focus on the 2 days of the major aspects, and that'll be the 13th and the 31st. And that'll be the day we get the Jupiter square Neptune on the 13th. And just note the location of Saturn in the USA's natal chart at 14 degrees of Libra. So that means the USA's Saturn is caught up in both of these aspects. And generally speaking, my theme of this is the USA is going to be facing a structural crisis because of all this stuff having to do with Saturn. So on the 13th, or around the time of the 13th, the USA gets Jupiter sextile Saturn and Neptune quincunx Saturn. Well, the Jupiter sextile Saturn from 14 degrees of Sagittarius, that's nice. That's helpful. But the Neptune transit indicates that the USA's sense of structure and continuity seem to be in jeopardy. You know, there again, with Neptune dissolving your sense of structure, your grip on reality, your sense of continuity. And now Neptune says, hey, there's something that you haven't seen that's now going to be suddenly inserted or injected into your structure. And your structure is going to be caught off balance, not going to be able to know the boundaries. The normal boundaries no longer exist. And what happens is some precise adjustment needs to happen. In this case, maybe the loss of a leader, but not Trump. More likely Hillary, because she too is a leader of a movement. And she's getting two Neptune quincunx transits of her own at the same time. So the nation loses its sense of structure for a while. Kind of like legs get knocked out from underneath you. And basically, something needs to die away in order for the nation to regain its structural integrity. So that's a pretty big thing. And just one day earlier, on January the 12th, the USA is getting the transit Saturn opposition Sun. And that'll be 12 degrees of Capricorn to 12 degrees of Cancer. Now this is a challenging and debilitating transit. really slows you down. And like Saturn, those hard aspects, they bring a time of testing for events that began earlier. In this case, events that began 14 years ago, because it's the opposition. And that was September 2003 to June 2004, and that was near the start of the second Iraqi war, the one after 9/11. With this transit, confrontations and political or legal battles the U.S. faces at this time weaken the nation, regardless of the outcome. Okay? So it doesn't matter if Trump wins. Even if he wins, it's a really good thing for him, but still, this indicates it's going to be tough on the nation. Good or bad, it's still going to hurt. And that's kind of telling, because you would expect that kind of a transit to be happening at this time. And it's a time of endings. Low energy, so it's no new adventures. The nation is not in any condition for offensive actions. Now is the time of pulling back, feeling restrained. We're weak and doubtful, especially with the Neptune transit coming in as well. So that's another reason to believe that this time the military withdrawal from Syria is the real deal. It's going to really happen. An underlying sense of uncertainty about the future of the country prevents any forward movement at this time. So the pace of things kind of slows to a crawl, very little activity. Not a good time for the economy. It's going to bring lots of introspection and the need for therapy, such as we could expect if some big event shakes us to the core. The Jupiter square Neptune brings revelations. With all of this Neptune energy on the Saturn like this, and the humiliating and deflating quality of the Saturn opposition Sun, it could humiliate the USA, tarnish the nation's reputation. This is a time of things dying away because they are no longer valid. So, of course, national pride, because the Sun rules Leo, and that's the lion, it's the pride. National pride at a 28-year low. Happens once every 28 years. Once every Saturn cycle. So this transit precedes a time of substantial changes in the way the nation operates. New structures will come into place to replace whatever was not working. And moving forward to the end of the month, on the 31st, when we get the Saturn sextile Neptune aspect, the USA is getting another tough Saturn transit. Saturn square Saturn. Okay, once again, a critical time of testing. This time it's the square, so it's for events that began 7 years ago. And that would have been at the conjunction of Saturn, Conjunct Saturn, the Saturn return. And that was in the mid-2011. And that was at the time of the start of USA's military involvement in Syria. Wow, what a coincidence. The so-called war against ISIS, which is really just a deep state operation. Interesting to note that the USA is ending military action in Syria concurrent with these two tough Saturn transits, especially this Saturn square Saturn, which is that typical, or I should say traditional, 7-year testing for whatever's not valid dies away. So yet that is a third reason to believe that this pullback from Syria is the real deal. And at the same time, because it is going away at the square, it teaches us that the war in Syria was never about the long-term survival of the USA. It was never a valid Saturn endeavor. It was rather something for the long-term survival of the deep state. So the 7-year Saturn square really held true, and what was not valid is dying away because it was never valid to begin with. And the fact that we got the Jupiter transit to go along with it, bringing a sense of burden and relief, is what has given me such high hopes that it's for real now. We're going to pull back from Syria, because that nation has been absolutely devastating for Syria. That nation is in ruins. And just as a side note, I decided to check the transits for the Republic of Syria at the time when the USA announced the military withdrawal. And here we've got the transit: Pluto, Quincunx, Jupiter. Pluto at 20 degrees of Capricorn, Quincunx, Jupiter at 20 degrees of Gemini. Well, that's just perfect. You know, yet another precise adjustment, and this time it was for the benefit of Syria. But the synchronicity is just absolutely perfect here. We have a powerful, precise adjustment necessary for them to grow. So this basically had to happen in order for their Jupiter to be set free, so to speak, so that they can grow again. Because right now, they can't do anything with all of this war going on inside of their country. And so that's a very clear manifestation of the quincunx, and shows you the power of the Pluto quincunx, and how even though they're swept along by forces that they do not control, still in this case it was for their benefit, which it can be sometimes. So I thought I'd just share that with you, just to let you know we've got so many of these quincunxes happening this month, and that's the kind of precise adjustment we're looking for. So a summary of the politics, and it looks like January will bring an end to the Russia collusion story once and for all, and disgrace for those involved. Hopefully court trials as well. As well, we could see revelations that are hard to believe. Remember, we're going to have to expand the boundaries of our thinking, overcome the limitations to what we can believe. And the Saturn transits for the USA indicate this is a rather karmic time. Luckily, that Jupiter sextile Saturn will help authority make the proper adjustments. But for sure, whatever happens in January will surprise everyone. It will bring a structural crisis, which will be followed by some much-needed changes. And Trump will have a great relief, and Hillary will face a very difficult moment that ends her career, could take a toll on her health, and even coincide with her death. All things considered, it will be a very big month for the USA, and it could be a big month for you as well. You know, check your chart. See if you have planets at 14 degrees, especially 14 degrees of Leo. That would be at the tip of a yod. And whatever corresponding transits you are getting this month from Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. You know, for me personally, it's kind of interesting. My Neptune is at 14 degrees of Scorpio. So I get Neptune trine Neptune. I got one more pass of that coming. And Saturn sextile Neptune, the transit, while we are all getting Saturn sextile Neptune, the aspect. I thought that was a nice synchronicity for myself. So check your chart, see what's happening with this. And afterthoughts. Considering the U.S. is pulling away from the conflict in Syria, it reminds me that the Jupiter square Neptune and Saturn sextile Neptune will both bring more compassion and understanding regarding the suffering of human beings caught up in war, as well as a need to say, enough is enough, end the suffering. From these two aspects, there will be a lot of compassion, forgiveness, and outpouring of humanitarian values. All things Neptune and Pisces get a boost and get restructured, like we have not seen in a long time. This could translate to many good developments around the world as we see genuine efforts to help the disadvantaged. You know, and it's not just the children caught up in the sex trafficking, but the people that society has swept under the carpet. The poor and those who are in prison, and the victims of war and religious and political violence. You know, I know this sounds very idealistic, but that's Pisces, and that's the kind of energy we're looking at with these planets all in their ruling signs now in this tight synchronicity. These aspects will cause us to address these Pisces issues, and some of this will be politically motivated, but there will be certainly a genuine feeling behind it nonetheless. And religious institutions will undergo similar changes to redirect their efforts towards the founding principles of their faith. And each of us will experience a great awakening like we haven't had in a while. This is a month to expand your consciousness, overcome your fears and superstitions, and get in touch with your sole purpose in life. Because after this is over, it will be clear that despite all the turmoil, we will now have one big relief. A burden will be lifted off our shoulders collectively, a reprieve from this political drama, and it will start a whole new chapter in American politics. And what we encounter this year will be hard to believe. And I will expand the range of possibilities for hard to believe to go far beyond just politics. The Jupiter square Neptune charts new territory. Amazing discoveries may come to the surface. Ancient ruins that speak of a completely different Earth history than the one we were taught in school, and contrary to mainstream thought. Most certainly at some point this year, mainstream academia will be presented with something that they cannot explain away by the standard model, and it may very well have to do with ancient ruins in Antarctica or something along those lines, something that speaks of an ancient civilization that forces us to revise history and reminds us of an ancient past, possibly a time when they were technologically very advanced, more so than we are now, or more so than we are led to believe. And we are still waiting for the Nibiru Nemesis system to transit the sun so that we can all see it. You know, they are doing an incredible job of blocking out the sun with chemtrails, and have been for a long time. But there is still a lot of evidence out there to indicate that it's coming through, and if it transits the sun, it's going to have quite an incredible effect. It's really going to expand our consciousness very fast. It's going to be very hard to believe, and something along those lines may very well happen. So thank you very much for viewing. And just to let you know, I am a practicing astrologer, and if you're interested in getting a reading from me, please contact me at mobilestar7@yahoo.com or through my weblog or my website. I'll leave links in the description. And lately I've been doing a lot of 1-hour phone consultations for $35 and half hours for $25. And note, I can work with Skype. And during that consultation session, I can also do long-distance Reiki healings as well as guided meditation. So that's all for this report. Once again, thanks for viewing, liking, and I really appreciate when you share my video. That really helps to get the word out. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Many blessings, and be good to yourself.